Hi everybody, I'm Steve. I'm still an alcoholic, and this video is gonna be about my experience with step 6 of the 12 steps of recovery. And step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. The suggested reading is very short, actually, in the big book, page 76 in the big book, and it's just one paragraph, and it says more about step 6 actually in the 12 and 12, step 6 in the 12 and 12. What it says in there is that it's the step that separates the men from the boys, so to speak. The reason that it says that is because now when you get to step 6 and in steps 4 and 5, you learned, wow, I have these things called character defects, which are nothing to be afraid of. They all just boil down to self-centered fear, as it turns out. But you're embarking on this journey, this aspect of the journey known as self-awareness. Self-awareness has to do with humility. Self-awareness is basically being the observer of your behaviors, which when I was active in my addiction and my alcoholism, I was never willing to look at my behaviors and do any inventories around the way I behaved, because in my delusional mind, I never did anything wrong. And I wasn't selfish, and the world was just out to get me, and I was always being wronged, and I just couldn't catch a break, and I was a victim of life. That was my delusional perception when I was active. Well, now that I'm in recovery, I have to become self-aware, which means I have to be willing to look at my behaviors, get honest about them, list my strengths and my weaknesses, and be honest about these are the things that I'm good at, and these are the good things that I've done. But these are the areas where I've been selfish and kind of behaved selfishly and done some things that maybe aren't so good. And that's called being self-aware, and it requires humility and it requires honesty. And if you're like me, you've got a big ego or had a big ego. It's smaller than it used to be. When you're new in recovery, you might have a big ego that doesn't like to do those things. And that was myself included. But steps 6 and 7 are about character defects and being self-aware, being honest with yourself about your character defects, which again are basically just all self-centered fear. So one of the reason why step 6, they say it separates the men from the boys, is they're kind of alluding to the challenging nature of step 6, which is, are you ready to let go of your character defects, which we can sum up as self-centered fear, your selfishness, your manifestations of selfishness. Are you ready to let them go? Because some of them we really like. And the metaphor, the comical metaphor that you may hear is, you can always tell my character defects because they're the ones that have scratch marks and claw marks in them. Because you hang on to them and they can be stubborn and it can be challenging. But step 6 is basically you're deciding for yourself that, okay, I've got an inventory of my character defects that I got in steps 4 and 5. I'm getting honest with myself about them, being self-aware, observing them, being aware of them when they crop up, but I'm willing to let them go because they're not serving me and they're causing me suffering, as I can see on paper because I wrote about it. Step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, which means I'm willing to let them go, which can be challenging. And it's an ongoing battle. It's not a battle, but it's an ongoing sort of effort required. Gets easier as you go, but I've been sober 10 years, over 10 years, and character defects do crop up. But I'm willing to look at them and be self-aware about them. That's the difference. A neat trick that somebody taught me recently was that if you've got, or in my case, I had a particular set of character defects that were being really stubborn and they were cropping up, and I kept being willing to let them go and in step 7 praying to have my higher power remove them, but they just kept cropping up over and over again in a sort of stubborn kind of way. And I was getting a little bit frustrated about it. And somebody shared something at a meeting where they said, if you've got stubborn character defects and you're trying to let them go and you're praying for them to be let go and they keep cropping up, pray to your higher power to help change your perspective of these character defects. And I tried that, and that actually worked. When these character defects, these stubborn ones, would crop up, after praying about them, I would see them in a different way, and my perception of them would change, which made it easier to let them go, if that makes any sense. And that's a kind of a trick that I've been incorporating lately. I'm happy to say that my character defects are a lot different now than they were 10 years ago. They're a lot less severe. They're a little bit fewer and far between than they were at the beginning, but I'm certainly not perfect. I still have them and they still crop up, but I've got tools to deal with them now. And I can be self-aware and I can be honest with myself about my character defects when they do crop up. And that gives me serenity. So that's my experience with step 6.